All right, well, welcome everyone. My name is Professor Adrian Pantoja. I teach politics and Chicano Studies here at Pitzer College. I'm also one of the new associate deans here at Pitzer College. I'm joined by this distinguished group of individuals who will introduce themselves. But I'd also like to turn it over to my co-associate dean, Susan Phillips, who will say a few words about who she is and some of the new programming that's coming up in the tomorrow and in the next few days.
Right. Okay. So thanks, Adrian. I really appreciate you agreeing to introduce and moderate tonight's panel. It's a really exciting one, I think. This is the second in a series of 3 panels. And this one is specifically about community engagement and civic engagement. And what we're going to be talking about tonight, of course, Adrian will introduce. Yesterday's panel is something you can find on our Facebook page, on Pitzer College's Facebook page. Was a panel discussion on general education. It has already had 1.2 thousand views, which is pretty remarkable. And then tomorrow's panel will be more about praxis. So it's going to be a panel about, art, photography, media studies, lab science. Like, how on earth are you going to learn that in your living room? So that'll be Friday at 5. We hope people can join. There's also going to be office hours. Again, we've had, I think, a wonderful 2 days of office hours in which any student can drop by to any faculty. I'll put it in the chat where that stuff is. And so, yeah, we will be, our faculty have just volunteered to meet with students and their families. If you have any questions, I spent a good hour and a half today meeting with families and students that had questions. The last thing I will say is that several members of the Claremont Student Worker Alliance here at the Claremont Colleges contacted us before the panel saying, can you talk about this mutual aid fund that they're creating? The CSWA, the Claremont Student Worker Alliance, aims to build relationships across campus and to empower workers. And they're doing a mutual aid project, a mutual aid fund to aid basically distributing monetary funds to workers across the Claremont colleges. And the whole concept of mutual aid goes really well with tonight's panel because it is part of organizing and direct action that's taking place right now. So they are going to put that information about that campaign in the chat for everyone to see. And I will turn it back to you, Adrian. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you. So we have an impressive panel that's going to be discussing the ways they and their centers will be engaging in politics and activism this fall. Each of the panelists will introduce themselves and will speak for about 10 minutes, and then we can open it up for questions from the audience. Before I turn it over to the panelists, I was reflecting on where we are at this moment in time in history. So I wanted to just say a few words before I turn it over to the panelists. I think we're in this unique moment in time. And so for certain generations, there are certain events that are forever imprinted in our minds, and they mark a turning point, not only in their lives, but also a turning point in the history of this country. For my father's generation, that was probably the assassination of JFK. I think forever he was changed by that, and that generation was changed, going from what often is described an era of innocence, the 1950s, into the more tumultuous 1960s. For me, I would say certainly the horrific events of 9/11 marked a turning point in my life, but it also marked a turning point in the life of this country. Prior to that, we used to talk about the post-Cold War era. After 9/11, we no longer talk about the post-Cold War era. Politics was forever changed and became the post-9/11 world. 9/11 was interesting because just a few months later, my son Emilio was born. And so for his generation, I suspect he and his generation, they're going to be asked the question, where were you in 2020? What did you do in 2020? In particular, what did you do in the fall of 2020? And he will forever get to say, I started as a student at Pitzer College. And so the people on this panel, I think, are going to create one of the most amazing, transformative semesters in the history of the college. And I firmly believe that my son is forever going to be changed by attending this university. And so I want to turn it over to the panelists who are now going to say all the amazing things that they and their centers are doing to engage in politics and activism. The panelists are going to be called on alphabetically, so we'll start with Nigel Boyle.
Thanks, Adrian. So I'm Nigel Boyle, and I've taught at Pitzer for 28 years. And referring to pivotal moments and pivotal historical events, my first semester at Pitzer was when the Rodney King beating happened, and the uprising and all the events which unfolded out of that. And that was a seminal event for that generation of students and faculty. And so that's one advantage of being the old guy here, is that you have that kind of historical memory just here at Pitzer. But it was very intense. I remember I was a brand new professor, and in my comparative politics class, I had some African-American kids that had had these terrible experiences with the police. And I had this Korean-American kid whose parents' place had been burnt out in South Central. So there were some really interesting conversations we had at that point. But I've been a professor here for a very long period of time. I've spent the last few years, I crossed over to the dark side. I was the Dean of Faculty for a while, but I'm now happily back as a faculty member and directing the Institute for Global Local Action and Study. It's been very interesting looking at what's happening at institutions across the country right now. There are colleges and universities talking about new requirements regarding a curriculum that addresses racism, intercultural understanding, social justice. Pitzer has already gone down this road. So we have these specific core educational requirements. Intercultural understanding, global intercultural understanding, local, social justice theory, social justice praxis, and they're very sort of detailed as to and the curriculum that can address those has been specified. The Institute for Global Local Action and Study pegs very closely onto these four core requirements, and this is very much what we're now going to be wrestling with this semester. As Adrian had already indicated, this is going to be a sort of epic semester in many respects. And like Adrian, I'm a political scientist, and I would love to start talking about the election, but I'm going to restrain myself here, and in particular focus on the what has already been happening and what is going to happen regarding policing, criminal justice system, mass incarceration, and the larger conversation that's grown since the killing of George Floyd. So what I thought I would do is to say a little about what's already been here in the Claremont colleges, what we were working on moving forward, and how we're now adapting in the face of the COVID crisis. Across the 5 Cs, and again, we're rested in the 5 Cs here, there's a vast amount. I've got a whole list of 40 plus courses that are regularly taught that address these issues in the curriculum. So there's already been a lot of great pioneering work done by faculty at Pitzer and at the other colleges. Where we were at in terms of building on that is there's 2 pieces to it. We have a lot of inside out courses that are being taught in local prisons. Adrian Pantoja has taught his Latino politics class inside a local prison. And again, teaching that class inside a prison where this a very large Latino population, again, puts a different twist on things. But we've had this inside out curriculum. And what we're starting to do is sort of build a curriculum inside local institutions. So it's not just an occasional course, but it becomes something that can grow into a BA program. Here in Claremont, we're also looking to build the curriculum. We've got this Justice Education Initiative, and we hope that within 3 or 4 years now, there will be a justice education or critical justice education major, so that all of the issues that the people are most interested in this area could be sort of folded into and made the centerpiece of their education. So this sort of curriculum was already in the process of being constructed. Then we have COVID hit. Those of you students that were in the Inside Out class last semester know that those classes had to be completed as far as the inside students are concerned, the students at the local prison, via correspondence. But fortunately, we've been able to do some quick work now over the last few months, and going forward in the fall, we're going to have our Inside Out classes are going to be taught via Zoom. And this is actually a national first. We are the first institution in the country. So Pitzer students that are in Inside Out classes this fall will have Zoom based classes with guys inside. This has never happened before. So a really important breakthrough there. Another program that we have is the Reintegration Academy. This is where we bring significant numbers of recently released people who are recently incarcerated, bring them to campus for a semester-long program in which they come, they eat in the dining hall, there's programming that's provided for them, there's an effort to get them on track for higher education and so forth. We're going to be building on that and connecting those members of the Reintegration Academy with courses that are taking place this semester. So it's two examples of how Pitzer is actually taking advantage of the difficulties to initiate new types of programming. So that's what's been going on regarding the prison education related programming we have here in Claremont. And before I pass it back, I'll make one last comment. Pitzer is actually at its best in crises like this. This is an institution where faculty are encouraged to be experimental. A line that I always used as dean that I got into trouble with is the threshold for doing crazy shit at Pitzer is really low. We're really good at innovating. A lot of institutions are like oil tankers. You know, it takes them forever to make a marginal adjustment. Pitzer and the faculty and Susan has been, and Adrian have been leading this effort this summer, have been very quickly responding and doing innovative things. So in fact, this is where we've been taking the lead. And I think in this area of Inside Out classes, justice education, Pitzer has once again been the sort of petri dish for the Claremont consortium. We're trying stuff and we're able to lead the others. And so I think that's what exemplifies what we're doing in this area. And I think you'll hear a comparable story with what's taking place in other parts of the curriculum, including the Community Engagement Center. So with that, I'll turn it back to Adrian.
Great, thank you, Nigel. Yeah, we probably do have a low threshold for doing crazy shit, radical shit too, but certainly very Pitzery. Let me turn it over now to Trisha Morgan, who will be talking about the famous and well-known Community Engagement Center. Introduce the center to us.
Thanks so much, Adrian. Susan, if you'd like to share the screen now, I have some slides that are going to help kind of center what we're talking about tonight. My name is Trisha Morgan. I'm the Managing Director of the Community Engagement Center. I've been here for about 12 years. Before that, I was a Pitzer student also, so Pitzer is really near and dear to my heart. I'm also currently a PhD student at the Claremont Graduate University School of Education for Higher Education Administration. So we have a lot to talk about, so I'm just going to jump right in. First slide, please, Susan. Our staff has really been working around the clock with partners, with faculty, other departments, alumni, to really streamline and make available a plethora of opportunities for students for this fall, whether those are connected to their social responsibility praxis courses, social justice theory, or any other type of courses, or just as volunteers. These areas have been newly redesigned based on really fresh current input from partners, our community partners, from faculty, from students about their community engagement interests and needs. Tonight, we're really focusing the conversation on civic engagement, which is always important, but especially this year. So we certainly won't be able to cover everything that we do in the Community Engagement Center during tonight's panel, but we welcome questions about anything else that we don't cover tonight at a later time, and we hope that everybody will get involved. Susan, do you want to go to the next panel, please? Or the next slide, thanks. So the challenges that communities were facing prior to March, it probably won't surprise anybody. Issues like police brutality, homelessness, access to medical care, environmental degradation, these are still there. And these are actually really amplified right now for several reasons. We're in a global pandemic. There's a resurgence of the ongoing, civil rights movement. More people are participating in that now than have in a long time. This is a census year. Excuse me, this is a census year. This is also an election year, possibly one of the most important elections in US history, certainly in a very long time. And communities are really experiencing a lot of high need, not just because of all of these reasons, but in light of, we're in this new Zoom era. We're in this technologically dependent era more so than ever before, and access to technology is a real challenge for a lot of communities. So these are all things that we're thinking about. Civic and community engagement is not only absolutely possible right now, but it is critically important. We see ourselves as serving all of these constituencies that you see listed on the right-hand side, and we really do welcome involvement and suggestions from everyone. Next slide. So getting to the real meat of the conversation here and what we're going to talk about tonight, CEC has organized those 5 pillars of engagement that you saw previously, and civic engagement is one of these. We are doing a lot of work related to connecting courses with the needs of community partners. There's several reasons for why we're really focusing on connections with partners and courses. Part of this is because then students get the guidance of faculty throughout the semester to support their work in their disciplinary field. They also get to work more collaboratively in a more structured way and work with and learn from their own peers. Partners really get the benefit of then, rather than just one person being involved, we multiply the involvement beyond that one student to maybe a cohort of students or an entire class. So impacts for the community can be much greater. Some of the free resources and tools that we're offering are, things related to support in finding legislation. How do you find current legislation? Where do you look? How do you know where it's at in the process, in the legislative process, whether this is for state, for local, or for federal things? How do you launch your own campaign, like a legislative campaign or a political campaign? How do you support that other folks that are doing, launching their own campaigns? How do we effectively engage with elected officials? How do we support broader social movements in ways that are really related to legislation and to policy? Some of the really important legislative campaigns that are big focuses for our community partners right now are HR 7120, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Also California State Proposition 15, also known as the Schools and Communities First proposition. We're also looking at legislation that provides broader support for Medicaid expansions and other movements like rent and mortgage relief, ending immigrant detention. These are things that are really obviously important to our partners, and they span, like I said, local, state, and federal. These are just a couple of the examples, but policing, defunding the police and reinvesting in communities, it's really important. These are also things that police officers have been saying for a long time, that they are being asked to take on responsibilities that they are not, that they may not have the qualifications for. So taking that money and really reinvesting in communities is really important right now. We're also actually making a lot of great connections in this moment with alumni. People are getting in touch with us. They're saying, hey, I'm here at home. I really care about these issues and this work. What can we do to support students and partners? And so it's really exciting. Some of those folks are connected in other ways to public sector jobs, people working in all levels of government. So it's really cool that we have these great resources within house to be able to come and support this work. The next thing that I'm going to talk about, the next slide, Susan, we have a separate pillar for community organizing and direct action, which I'm sharing here because I think we all know that the two, civic engagement, community organizing, and direct action, are really intimately linked, and that organizing and activism is a key component to driving driving policy and legislative change. Some of the immediate action items that we're gonna connect people with are things like petitions, phone banking, letter writing. These are things that need a quick turnaround. Like, people need to call their representative right now and demand that California has mandatory ethnic studies in K through 12 education. We need everybody to call before noon tomorrow, right? Like, that's an example. These things need to be turned around really quickly. They need quick support. We're also going to be providing a lot of resources. Some of those will be on things like allyship and coalition building, but also like free and reduced legal services through the National Lawyers Guild, access to the Mass Legal Defense Program for activists. Something that was suggested by Professor Laura Harris, which we're really excited about, is providing information around protest safety and support, first aid information, know your rights pamphlets in various languages, etc. Some of the key organizations also that we want to make sure that folks are getting connected with are places like the Highlander Center, Nancy Luna Jimenez Institute for Social Transformation, Beautiful Trouble, the Parker Palmer Center for Courage and Renewal. These are really, really great organizations that have been doing work supporting activists and organizers for a long time. So I don't know if I have any like a minute or two left, because we'd love to show you our redesigned website. Adrian's given me the go ahead. So Susan, if you want, you can either click to the website now, or if you want me to share, I can do it. What do you think? Oh, you're muted. Let me just, oh, there you go. You got it. It's always hard to navigate once you kind of, do that share screen to find the.
I think this might be my kid's Snapchat. It's really terrifying that this is happening.
Okay.
I'm trying. I'm not sure why it's glitching out on me. Oh my God, I'm in my child's Snapchat. I apologize. This is just ridiculous. Here it is. It's all queued up.
Yay. Okay, there we go. Great. Sorry to spring that on you last minute, Susan. That was kind of my fault.
No, I was ready. It's just something happened.
So if you could just scroll down a little bit, we just want to show you, like, these are the kind of those big pillar areas, those colorful buttons. We have a lot of other things that are going to be available to folks, but if you could just click on the Civic Engagement link, Susan. Two of the sub-pages here that I want to call your attention to are like the policy and legislation link, if you want to click on that one. So this is where we're going to be developing different collections of legislation on all these different levels, so that you can click on these. These are not just any legislation. This is stuff that's really important for our community partners. So we hope that you will put some added support towards some of these. If you could go back to the resource page, I just want to show some of the resources there that we're sharing. One more clip, there you go. Key resources. Oops, sorry, back to Civic Engagement on the key resources link there. Sorry about that. So yep, that one. So these are some of just the running list of organizations. We also have like sample letters to elected officials that have been really effective in the past, if people want to use those as templates, ways to look up when you need to register to vote, depending on your state, how you need to, how you can do mail-in voting, what are the deadlines, all of those things. And I just wanted to close by saying that you know, whether you're any students, any Pitzer students, literally anywhere in the world right now, we can use your support on these issues. So if you're an international student, if you are a new resources student, any students, like please let us know. We want to get you involved. We're building all of these things as we go. There's more things that we know every day that we're like, wow, we really need to add that. So if you have suggestions, we welcome that. So please let us know if you have a great resource, if you know somebody who would be an excellent speaker for a class or for an event, please let us know. We're happy to get in touch with you and put everybody to work right now because we all need it. So look forward to your questions, and that's it for me. Thanks, Adrian.
Great, Tricia. Wonderful. So I think the takeaway for me is, you mean education hasn't stopped? Politics hasn't stopped because of COVID? Of course not. I mean, it's absurd. So this is just amazing work that CEC continues to do and that you continue to do. Let me turn it over to Tessa Peterson, who will be talking about CASA and some of the great work she and CASA is doing.
Thanks so much, Adrian and Susan and everyone. Tricia, that was beautiful. And we're really lucky to have the Community Engagement Center as a constant resource for students and faculty and parents and alumni to get engaged. So there's so many ways to do that. I'm going to step back a little bit and actually frame sort of what Adrian just pointed to, like education's not stopping, community engagement's not stopping just because everything feels so disrupted. And why is it important? And how can we do it now and this semester? I just want to step back, and I usually always go off the cuff, but I actually prepared some remarks because I wrote something for my students. And I'd like to share that with you all here, which is that as the world faces these new realities of global pandemic and global uprisings against racial injustice and police brutality, here at Pitzer, we've actually been engaging in these same critical topics of community health and racial justice and social justice since the founding of the school. So while widespread attention to these topics is now trending, our community partners and students and faculty have been trudging away, often quietly and behind the scenes, to collaboratively investigate and organize social change around community health and well-being and civil rights for a long time. Our action research projects with our community partners are longitudinal. They're community-led, spanning environmental and food justice, criminal justice, immigrant justice, workers' rights, critical mentoring, anti-racist education, and arts and culture in our region. These are the issues that are most important to our local community members and the community organizations that work with them. And they're also the issues that draw Pitzer students here. These are the issues that are critical to the well-being of our whole country, and we're really invested in them. So obviously, in light of safety concerns, we're gonna all be online this fall. And while this may initially seem counterintuitive to place-based learning and community engagement, we can actually still really have a profound experience together. We can still make it interactive and experiential, even via Zoom. We can make it one that is connected to the critical issues of our times and the amazing organizations working on them. And we can make it an experience that actually embodies collaboration and connection despite the separation of time and space, which I think is really important because I think we all feel awfully isolated right now, and we have an opportunity to be connected and to collaborate in really meaningful ways. In fact, I would say that this may be the most pertinent time for community engagement work, as communities that are most marginalized and vulnerable to both racial injustice and health disparities are not going anywhere because we simply won't be on campus. They need our support now more than ever and have requested that we maintain our organizing, our research, and our activist collaborations digitally into the foreseeable future. And we are responsible to that request and to that partnership, and we're going to do it. So this distance learning and this distance engagement can take many forms. And Tricia went through some of these right now, right? You can be organizing through research, through grant proposals and creating reports, through GIS, policy advocacy, writing white papers, op-eds, social media campaigns. These are the things that our communities have said they want and need. And these are all things that we can do flexibly during different time frames, no matter where you are in the world, through email, through Zoom, through synchronous and asynchronous ways of being together in this work. The other thing I really want to say, and this is a really important thing about Pitzer, is we're not just saying, okay, you know, go volunteer and isn't that nice? We really couch it in these really important classroom frameworks, right? So you're still going to have a class and the engagement, and they're still going to be embedded together. And in the classes, we get to connect the issues we're attending to in the community back to larger systems and root conditions that have led to these issues, right? So for example, I'll tell you, in my own course, We examine the specific political geography, history, and regional equity impacts of the Inland Empire, as well as critical approaches and theories of social change. This fall in particular, we're going to be highlighting issues of healing justice and racial justice through critical texts, through discussions, guest speakers, experiential activities. I have been doing meditations on Zoom that are like, I could get chills and feel people across the ether. Even through our very distinct, separated technological ways of doing it, we can still have that experience together. We'll be doing, in my class, liberation arts. We'll be doing meditation. We'll be doing constructivist listening, active dyads. We'll be doing all kinds of things that bring us together in this time, even though we're apart. I mean, we're also going to directly engage with scholars and practitioners in the areas that we care about. We're going to have community co-educators come and be guest speakers and speak about these issues in their communities and what they hope and want from our participation. So literally, like everything we would normally do in person, we're going to keep doing. We're going to keep doing it. It's going to be online. It's going to be different, but it's still going to be really important. And I think pretty innovative and impacting. And I have no fear that it's not going to be both important and also connective. So that's my spiel. I'm sticking to it. I've been talking to a lot of students lately about this and if they should stay or come. And I think there's just absolutely no question in my mind there's so much work to be done. If you would like to learn, Adrian, do I have a couple minutes just to talk specifically about CASA?
Yeah, please talk about CASA. Yeah, you have plenty of time.
Thank you. So CASA is a wonderful program at Pitzer that was founded 22 years ago to give students a real connection to the place that we are in Southern California and the issues in the communities happening here. So we actually have a community center. We have partners that are located in this region and work on issues related to immigrant justice, carceral justice, food justice, education justice, and arts and culture, and all kinds of different topics. And we do deep dives with them. We actually do hours and hours each week, not only of class time engaging on the theories that surround the topics that folks are dealing with, but we have these really long and deep partnerships with organizations where students get to work one-on-one. And it's really interesting in this way because these are very scrappy grassroots radical organizations with only 2 to 10 staff members. So when students become a part of them for multiple hours per week, they really become like a staff member. They really learn how a nonprofit works. They learn about political organizing. They learn about the difference between activism and service providing and charity work and radical revolutionary work. They get to really see into the nuances of all the different components that it takes to change the world, and they get to be a part of it. And I think it's different, of course, not being in person, but it's still, the work is still continuing, and the folks that we're working with, we can still have relationships with and make an impact with them. And so I think I just want to accentuate the idea that this is the time where our education is really being put to the test, and our sort of putting our walk and our talk is actually even more meaningful. Even though we can't do it in person and physically, we are actually doing a commitment to that mutual aid that we spoke of at the beginning of the conversation, right? To really being there and being responsible to our communities. And the beautiful thing about this is we can connect what's happening locally here, but also to what's happening wherever you are. So any student, wherever you are across the globe, I promise you that the issues that we're dealing with here, immigrant justice, food justice, incarceration issues, all of those things, those are likely pertinent to your own neighborhoods, and things are happening in your own communities that are relevant to that you'll be studying in the class. So while you may not be able to be engaged right here literally with us in Southern California, you can still also look into your own neighborhoods and your own backyards and what's happening wherever you are, right? And connect it to the readings and connect it to the engagement that you'll be doing digitally with partners around here. So there's multiple ways into this and multiple ways that it becomes relevant to your local position as well as sort of the global topics. So yeah, that's I think I'll stop right there. And of course, I'm open to any questions later if folks have them.
Tessa, I just wanted to say there's a couple of questions about CASA in the Q&A. If you want to take a stab at those, and we can also do it online. Just a quick reminder to use the Q&A if you have questions, and we're happy to answer them, and also after the session is over. Because Adrian, because Kathy is booted out for the time being, I would love to hear you speak a little bit about your own, I mean, not to put you on the spot, but You know, you gave a wonderful introduction, and it's weird because I talked about my father last night. So there's like, I think some of this stuff is almost like a familial thing that happens, you know, when you're doing this kind of, I don't know, when you think about social change and you think about your relationship to justice, questions of family are like right there. But would you be willing to talk a little bit about your classes and like your, until Kathy gets back, the, you know, the things that you're thinking about for the election?
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. Yeah, I thought I might not have time to do that, but you can, all of you can come to my advising session tomorrow at noon. So Susan Phillips scheduled a number of great advising sessions with different faculty, so that if you want to tune in, check in, talk to the faculty members. If you're thinking about a particular class or thinking about a particular major, this is advising online. So my session is tomorrow at noon. I'll talk about my class, U.S. politics. U.S. politics. So I started teaching this class about a year ago, and previously I taught, you know, any American political scientist, American politics, U.S. politics. That's your bread and butter course. That's the course that everybody teaches. It's almost like Intro to Psych 101 or Sociology 101. Frankly, I got bored with that class after a while. I got bored talking about the presidency, Congress, executive congressional relations. I mean, don't get me wrong, that's all very exciting, but I recrafted the class, and starting last year, and I'm going to continue doing this, I basically thought, what does American politics look like from the perspective of marginalized groups? Historically, American politics, it's largely dead old white guys, elites that have, you know, as much as I like Alexander Hamilton, the play, there's some problems with Alexander Hamilton and many of the founders. And we see problems with a number of folks whose statues line Capitol Hill. So I wanted to teach that course from the perspective of marginalized groups, and it's worked. And what's exciting about this semester with that class is because we're going to be virtually connected, the students are going to be my eyes and ears on the ground. If they're in Seattle, look, I can read about what's happening in Seattle, but to be there, that's a whole other thing. And the student can report to us, can let us know what's happening in Seattle, what's happening in Portland, what's happening in all other parts of the country. For international students, I want to know from the perspective of international folks, how are they seeing American politics? What are the discussions that are taking place? So in each class, aside from the content, learning the mechanics and having some interesting discussions about contemporary politics and American political institutions, I really want to learn from them what they're seeing on the ground, how they're engaging in politics at a very local level. So this version of American politics is going to have a very much a sub-federal focus. So that's just in a nutshell. There's a lot more there, but I'm glad that Kathy just joined us. So let me turn it over to Kathy Yep.
Thank you. Thanks, Adrian, for stepping in. In my neighborhood in Monterey Park, the internet just gets like really focused right now, so my apologies. I'm gonna go ahead and share a screen, and if I could get a thumbs up from one of the panelists, if you can see it. Okay, great. Well, I wanna thank the Video Faculty's Office as well as Advancement and Pitzer staff for running this event. Also want to give a shout out to Mike Pedro, who's the director of the ARC, and Linda Huang and Dan Brigado and different students that have participated in what I'm going to talk about. So I'm Kathy Yep. I'm a professor of Asian American Studies, and I've been here for 12 years, I believe. My PhD is in ethnic studies, and I'm a first generation of women in my family to be in college. My research tends to focus on people with few resources who create change or empowerment. The book on the left is a young adult novel that I wrote with Lawrence Yep, my uncle, about my grandfather. And he immigrated from China when he was age 8, and he was immediately detained and interrogated at Angel Island in the early part of the 20th century. And he raised me, and he never talked about it. So I found his archives, and that's what turned me to go from being a human rights attorney to actually get my PhD in ethnic studies. The book on the right shows basketball, and that's my great aunt and grandma. They all played basketball in the 1930s, and they used their bodies as ways to create collective empowerment when they were mostly working in a garment factory or where they were facing racial and gender segregation inside and outside of Chinatown. So I just wanted to give a little bit of context of my research and my approach to things. I teach classes like community health, health inequities, nonviolent social change, and I teach it through the lens of an assets-based approach. So what does everyone bring to the table, and then how do we mix it all up together to create really good analysis and understanding of things? I also am heavily influenced by Paulo Freire and this problem-posing pedagogy and this idea that everything should be dialogical, and not everything, but things can be dialogical in a learning environment, and that shifts the relationship of faculty and students to co-learning, and that also means alongside community partners. So it's not service learning, it's not charity, it's solidarity in relationship to each other. And the third approach that I take to teaching and my research is Kolb. Kolb talks about how people have many different ways of learning. There's kinesthetic, there's visual, there's auditory, as well as sort of more hegemonic traditional ways of learning. So I thought I would just frame that so that I could talk a bit about two examples of classes that will happen this fall that have completely shifted in some ways due to COVID-19, to give you a sense of what does it look like to have radical education online through a Pitzer lens and through an ethnic studies lens. So I teach a class with Carmen Font, who's a sociolinguistics professor, called Racial Politics of Teaching. And I gave a shout out to Mike Pedro earlier and Linda Huang and Jan because they've experienced this. So feel free to chime in on the chat of things I'm leaving out or things you want to add. So what we've done in Racial Politics of Teaching is we really look at race as a social construction and intersecting with other axes of stratification. And we look at it through the lens of comparing and contrasting different multiculturalisms. So there's conservative multiculturalism, liberal multiculturalism, and decolonizing. And then we compare and contrast through the lens of language ideologies, and particularly language ideologies in relation to citizenship. So what you're seeing in this photo is public library in Monterey Park. And in a pre-COVID time, students would get in a van, a Pitzer van, they would get the key at the mailroom, they would walk to the van, they would go and drive out to Monterey Park and provide citizenship coaching and ESL learning. And they'll learn things like the 3 multicultural frameworks. They'll think about questions like how do you do questions, how do you pose questions. And what we've done since March is we've converted it to online working with the library. So since March, we've done 10 sessions. This is the debrief from just Monday. I think I might be wearing the same clothes, sorry. So what you can see is it's become this online version. This is the debrief with the coaches. We've expanded to include some high schoolers as a pilot. So what I'm seeing is really interesting multi-generational learning from the LAMP learners who tend to be immigrant and refugees over the age of 50 or 60, the college students or recent alum, and then the high schoolers. Another example is I'll be teaching a class called the Social Theory of Thich Nhat Hanh. And if you are familiar with Thich Nhat Hanh, you know that he is a very significant social theorist of the 20th century and 21st century. And he comes from Vietnam and frames this idea of thinking about being fully present in the context of colonialism and war that his country experienced, and he was eventually exiled. And it's interesting to think about prison education through this lens of critical consciousness and social action of Thich Nhat Hanh. So we do in this class, normally what we do is we look at this concept of inner being. And this is Thich Nhat Hanh on the left when he met Dr. King in the 60s. This is his sort of partner in envisioning things, Sister Chong Kong. And in this quote, it gives you a sense of inner being, which is this idea of I'm not made of only non-me element. I'm made not of just me, but I'm made of other elements too. And often it's just seen as an individual act, interpersonal, but he's framing it in terms of a social political lens. So what we do in that class normally is thinking about inner being and engage Buddhism. And in this quote, and this is Thich Nhat Hanh, more recently, he's had a stroke and he's still practicing and community.
Adrian, do you want to read her quote instead, maybe?
Oh, we called it Engage Buddhism. Mindfulness must be engaged. Once there is seen, there must be acting. Otherwise, what is the use of seeing? So we lost Kathy Yep, unfortunately. I think that speaks to oh, she's back. She's back. Okay.
So in this quote, you can see this idea of it's not just being mindful and seeing, but it's also hinges with acting. And that sort of resonates with the social responsibility praxis component and mutual aid that we're talking about in here at Pitzer. So how I'm adjusting this class online is I'm continuing to partner with Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity, and Linda Huang is on this call as a rising senior. She's a Mellon Mays Fellow. She worked with this organization last summer on a timeline of immigration policies and the carceral state. So we have been to vigils outside of Adelanto Detention Center. And what we're doing to shift it online is two things. We're continuing the vigils, that is the community partner, and we're thinking about ways that we can look at those as texts in terms of thinking about interbeing and engaged Buddhism in there. So you see this quote, every person now, and this is a vigil that was outside of San Quentin on Sunday, every person now in San Quentin is on death row. We pray also for the guards, staff, and their families. They too deserve our compassion today. People treated as if their lives are expendable, but every person's life is precious here. So what we'll do is we'll attend the vigils, we'll analyze these as texts in terms of interbeing on an individual level and a social community level and a systemic level. So it just gives you a sort of taste of what we're going to do. Lastly, the other aspect of interbeing and engaged Buddhism is we've been offering Qigong online for the last 18 weeks. And so here's a screenshot from one of the first ones. Over 550 people collectively have been attending since that time. There's a couple people on this call that were attending class earlier this morning. And it's sort of a praxis-based way of thinking about how do we talk about interbeing, not just in a paper, not just by watching a visual, but what is my creative act of thinking about and theorizing about interbeing. So I think it's sort of taking these analytics from understanding the concept, writing about it, applying it, analyzing, and then creating and extrapolating. So I'll stop there so we can have time for dialogue and questions. If you would like to reach me or find out more information about these different engagements, you can go to my website. You're also welcome to come to Qigong class. It's a movement-based way of thinking about interbeing. And I'll stop there just so we can have more time for questions. Thanks so much, and thanks all for your patience with the internet. I appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you, Kathy. Let's go ahead and field some questions. We have about 10 minutes for questions from the audience. Susan, have you been keeping track of some of the questions? Do you know some of the...
Yeah, I have been keeping track. One of the ones that has come up is what is Pitzer College doing to engage and encourage students to be involved in the 2020 election?
Yeah.
Oh, and that's from our alum, Josue Pasillas. So it's really nice to hear from you, Josue. Yay!
Hope Chicago's, how's Chicago? So we have students from all over the country.
Do you mind if I, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Anybody, it's open.
Okay, great. Thank you for asking that question, Josue. We're going to be doing a lot of things, actually. We're going to be working on a voter engagement plan for all of Pitzer. So how are we going to help increase registration? How are we going to increase accessibility to information? Holding things like screenings, debate screenings, having folks come in and speak about specific legislative topics. So again, it's not just about the presidential election, although that's certainly very, very important. There's a lot of important work also that's happening on the state level and at local levels. And people often put a lot less energy and time and attention into state and local issues and focus a lot on the presidential race. And again, that's very important, but the policies that are being passed at our city and state levels are the things that are continuing to affect us for years, and all across the country. we're encouraging any students that are really interested in this to please get in touch with the Community Engagement Center, because we're assembling a group of faculty, of staff, of students, and alumni who all care about civic engagement and particularly work around the elections. And so we welcome opportunities for collaboration. We're also thinking about trying to, obviously connect some classes with things like letter writing to elected officials to make sure that, when things go up for vote, that they have the support of our representatives and that they know that the people are demanding that our representatives support this work. So that was it for me. Adrian, I don't know if you have more to add.
No, and anybody else want to speak about questions? I know, Kathy, you've been doing for many years naturalization projects. And so when we think of voting, sometimes we think, well, you register to vote and then you go cast your ballot. But for immigrant communities, the first step you need to overcome before you register to vote is you need to become a US citizen. So naturalization drives are fundamental to empowering immigrant communities. Are you still doing some of those naturalization projects, Kathy?
We are, and what's really exciting is over 11 years of being partnered with this adult literacy program, with a 99% passage rate of the citizenship exam. And so what's exciting about this program and moving online is we're continuing to open up dialogues about what does it mean to be politically involved, given your community's history with countries of dictatorships or totalitarian government. So I think what was really, really stunning about being able to have a liberal arts approach is we can have small spaces where our students and alums can talk alongside immigrant refugees elders about unpacking people's social autobiography or social biography with politics and with institutions, and then put it in this context now. And then, so it's not just a matter of checking the box, like we have 12 voters, we have this. It's actually getting into the sinew of what does it mean to be politically effective? What does it mean to be politically participant in a time when maybe certain communities are targeted and maybe certain communities are seen as disposable. So we get to have this conversation of the social contradictions and the ways that it can be both hopeful and the ways we can collaborate and the ways in which it can feel really uncomfortable and really challenging. So another example is really talking about anti-Blackness in the Asian immigrant community, right? So it's not just about getting people out to vote, but it's actually looking at the ways in which we all have been subject to a system that has hierarchies, and that is a barrier or a influence on the political engagement.
Wonderful.
I'll stop there.
Yeah, one of the things I haven't mentioned yet is this amazing racial justice initiative that President Melvin Oliver has launched, and Susan Phillips and I are the co-chairs of that initiative. A major component of that initiative is co-curricular programming, student engagement. But it would be so un-Pitzer-like for us to say, well, this is what we're going to do, and the students come along with us. What we're doing is we're basically waiting for the students to enroll, waiting for the students to sign up for classes. When Student Senate reconvenes, when other clubs and organizations reconvene, essentially we're going to put out a call and say, how do you want this initiative to work for you? What ideas do you have? You give us the ideas, you lead this project. So we're really excited to see how that evolves. No doubt the election is going to be fundamental to that initiative. I mean, this election is going to define, are we a nation that values diversity, equity, or are we a nation that is insular, inward looking, closed off to the world, closed off to ideas? I mean, well, I guess maybe by the tone of my voice, you can tell which direction I'm voting. But certainly the students are going to tie the Racial Justice Initiative to the 2020 election.
I totally agree, Adrian. There's also tremendous implications in terms of voting, in terms of felony disenfranchisement. So there are links to incarceration, and these take place all over the country. So it's possible that the vast geography and the vast geographical dispersal of our student body can actually be key in tackling some of these. I am looking for questions. There is a new open question here. Oh, can alumni participate in these classes? Okay, so I'm gonna, I would say in the initiatives probably. I wanted to talk a little bit, and maybe this goes on just to pose to our, we are an institution interested in equity and inclusion and diversity, and how is participation going to happen for students in different time zones? Students who may be juggling, some of the same challenges that our community partners face, where their parents are working, so they have to do childcare. Their parents have lost jobs, so they have to work. Maybe they're doing elder care. And so their flexibility in terms of like how to do community engagement, how to interact with your offices, how is that going to be taking place next semester?
We have about 2 minutes left, so anybody can field that question, and I'll
or you can shift it to a different question, or just say concluding remarks, Adrian.
The short version is to really consider social determinants of education. So what are the other factors that Dr. Phillips or Susan just outlined? So what that means for me, at least, is I'm doing asynchronous and synchronous. I'm doing informal and formal. So really considering the scaffolding of what the learning goals are and the outcomes and the assessments in the context of all those social determinants. And so an example might be, I might have a video. It's hilarious to shoot a video in my house and my cat's like on the other side of the door, like yelling, and then having some informal asynchronous ways, and then having synchronous. So a part of it is just thinking about the different ways that we can offer community building and learning structurally.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Well, I'm mindful of the time. We have a minute left, so I'm going to say some brief closing remarks. First of all, I want to thank all of these, the amazing panelists, and Susan for organizing these presentations. I'd also like to thank those who tuned in live, the parents and prospective students, alumni. So thank you all. I started off my remarks by saying, for my son, when asked, what did you do in 2020? He's always going to say, I started Pitzer College in 2020. So I envy him, but at the same time, I thought, wait a minute, I'm also going to be at Pitzer College in 2020, and we're all going to be at Pitzer College in 2020. So I'm eager to meet your child. I'm eager to meet the incoming class, but also for the parents. This is not the end of a journey, but this is the beginning. You too can stay engaged with Pitzer College. Reach out to the Parent Engagement Office in the Office of Alumni Affairs and the Office of Advancement. So there are many ways for all of us to stay engaged, for the alumni, for parents, for students, for the community. This is exciting, and I'm excited about what's coming up in the fall. So thank you all. And enjoy your the evening or morning, depending on your time zone.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Thank you, everybody.